Hello, everyone. Hello, world. Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Jesus Live. And today we're premiering a brand new show called Men Talk, where men are going to talk about so many things. And I'm very quite excited. And my name is Isaac Yami. And I'm quite excited. And most of the time, um, women talk a lot and men hardly talk. So men talk today we're going to be talking about so many things and without really wasting much time I'm going to call the panel that I'm going to work with tonight and my co-hosts Fernando and Nathan. Good evening Fernando.
Good evening, Isaac. How are you?
I am doing great, man. I'm doing great. How how's been your day?
My day, I woke up, had the Word of God, went to work, and came back to do some homework for school. But overall, God has been great. It's been a wonderful day. I
Yeah,
can't.
awesome. Yeah, I'm great. I'm good. I'm good. That's very positive. That's very positive. And my day was crazy as well. But yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'm here and I'm happy and I'm excited to premiere this show, Men Talk, for the very first time, season two. So so are you ready for tonight?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I like the topics that we're discussing tonight. I know that, it's something that we all need to hear about faith. And when it comes to men, you know, the Bible gives us a lot of like examples of men that have had faith, and that's always good to hear because it can help us grow in our faith, and it could give us like a an example.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Anyways, I want you to welcome yourself and introduce yourself to our viewers or watching us for the first time and just tell them who you are and basically what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Fernando Escalona. I live in Alabama, and I'm currently a full-time student at Oakwood University, but I'm doing it from home. And during my free time or my work is I'm a car detailer. So that's who I am.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. What are you studying? What are you studying?
I'm not sure yet. It's wild. I'm indecisive, but I know it's either gonna be something like with theology or something in the medical field.
Oh, that's great. That's great, man. All the best when you make up your mind.
Yeah.
That would be great. So today we're gonna have a special guest to join us, and today we're gonna be talking about men of faith. We're gonna kickstart with faith because faith is something that's very, very important. And we have so many men who have been written in the Bible who have so much faith, and today we're gonna be exploring that. And to help us, we have a special guest, and our special guest is Pastor Paul.
Hey, how are you all doing?
Good evening, Pastor
Good
Paul.
evening, good evening.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this special program, and I'm glad to be here.
It's our honor as well having you with us today, and I'm very quite excited to be sharing knowledge with you today. And
Thank you.
I want you to introduce yourself to your viewers and basically what you're all about and everything, so that they can know you better.
Sure, thank you. My name is Pastor Paul Kemo. I'm from Papua New Guinea, an island in the Pacific, and I'm here at Andrews University in Michigan, United States, studying a Master of Divinity here with my family. My wife and I have a 4-year-old daughter, and it's quite different from back home because we're experiencing a lot of snow lately. So, yeah, it's pretty cold here, but God is good.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a really really amazing. And today we're gonna be talking about men of faith. And yeah, like I don't know if I introduced myself very well, but I just wanna put I just wanna the reason why I'm saying this is because it's I wanna mention where I'm currently in right now because behind me there's a flag. There's a Zimbabwean flag because I'm from Zimbabwe, but I'm currently based in North Cyprus right now. And right now the time is 3 a.m. in North Cyprus. But I'm very quite excited, being here. I just wanted to mention it because I'm really, really excited to be here. So I just wanted to mention my commitment right now to this cause, and yeah, it's very interesting. So without really wasting much time, we're gonna dive into what we're gonna talk about today: man of faith. So we have four four characters that we've picked. We've picked Abraham, we've picked Joshua, we have picked the Hebrew boys, and we've picked Gideon. So the way we're going to talk about it today, we're going to talk about the characteristics, the similarities that they have, and the weaknesses and the strengths, and how we can be better men from learning from all of these great men. So I'm going to start with um with a brief description about Abraham. Abraham, Abraham, the father of faith. The reason why I'm taking Abraham is because my name is Isaac, and Abraham had a son Isaac, so I'm picking it up for myself. But yeah, Abraham is known for for leave for being told to leave the land he was in and going to another land where he didn't know anything right there. And also the most thing that's really known for is for attempting to sacrifice his son Isaac. And then that story is just remarkable how it ends and everything. So Fernando, um, give us any give us a brief short about Joshua.
Well, Josh, when it comes to Joshua, I always think of, being leaders. Oftentimes, all of us here right now on this platform, and even people watching us, have had the experience of being leaders of the church. And when you're in church, there's always something. There's always that difficulty. For example, I'll let you know, with my church, we don't have a building. We had one, but when COVID hit, everything got shut down, and then we don't have the building anymore. And right now we are meeting in small groups. And when it comes to the people of Israel, we find difficulties time after time after time. How God helps them, and then how they turn their back on God, and then how God helps them again. And it's just a full circle. And when I think of Joshua, I think, wow, that must have been hard, um, because you're leading people, and sometimes leading people can be hard because of the problems, but sometimes people leading people can be hard because of the people. And I think that he had to have a lot of faith in God and really put his trust in God in order to be the leader that the Bible describes him to be. And I love, I think we all know that verse, Joshua 1:9, where it says, do not fear, and have your trust in God. That really, for me, would sum up what, Joshua's faith was. He was a person who was willing to put his trust in God and not fear.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. You just given us Joshua at this very best. Pastor, can like a brief about the Hebrew boys and Gideon before we really dig
Um,
deep. Yeah.
the Hebrew boys, there's something significant about their stories, their boldness. Um, we know them to be uh, young men of faith in the midst of in a foreign land, and having their identity being changed, and so much going on, yet and being trained, and they were given the best treatment, and yet they were not willing to compromise. uh, and so they were bold enough to stand up And I remember them saying to King Nebuchadnezzar that, King, even if our God does not come through, we will still go through the fire, whatever it is that you want to do to us. We will still stand up for our God. So their faith was bold, and Gideon on the other hand was also willing to ask God for a test. And so often we don't dare to ask God for a test. Sometimes we just say, God, whatever your will is, may your will be done. And Gideon was someone who was courageous enough, and he really wanted God to uh, confirm the plan that God had for the children of Israel. So Gideon took that stand to ask God, and his faith demanded a test from God, to test God, to see if God was really going to come through for them. And that eventually happened in the story. So yeah, that's just something brief
Sure.
about the three Hebrew boys and Gideon.
Awesome, awesome. You have explained very, very, very well. So, the reason why I wanted us to explain a little bit first is, if you're watching and you don't really know much, so that when we start like really talking about it in depth, people would understand and everything. So now, going back to the first character, Abraham, and for me, I like I said, my name is Isaac, so I I I have a soft spot for Abraham. So I want us to now now talk about the characteristics of Abraham as a person, and how that aided him into having so much faith in God. Anyone wants to start talking about his characteristics? Fernando?
Okay, I'll go. um, yeah, well, when I think of Abraham, it's really, like I think you mentioned it or Pastor mentioned it. He had to leave. God told him to leave. His homeland and go somewhere else. And I can relate to that. Being, my family is from Mexico, and I'm living in the U.S. So, I think most of Abraham's life had to, like, the characteristic that I see in him was trust. And I think that's a fundamental in faith, trust, because if you don't have the trust, you don't really, you can't really say, okay, I have faith. He was willing to listen to God, when God said, leave, go here. And also with his son, with Isaac, and when I think of Isaac, it's really hard for me. I'm not a father yet, but imagine if somebody, like, for me, if imagine if God told me, okay, kill your brother, I would be like, hold on, God, like, are you sure
What's
that's what
going
you
on?
want? And he was willing, he was about to do it because he had that trust and that faith in God.
Yeah, that's very incredible. Before I give it to Pastor Paul to add a little bit, um, I I think also when thinking about the fact that he when you look at the two situations that happened where he was told to leave a certain land to go to a certain land that he didn't know. For me, I feel like his character was more he was obedient and he was radical in the sense that he would move, like he would move and he would just do it, like wait a minute, like like you just moving, like he was very radical, like he just left and then he went and then he trusted God, and then when he was told to sacrifice his son, he just went, it was just so radical, like he was radical in his obedience. He didn't question most times. He didn't say, God, why this and that. He was radical in his obedience. So for me, whenever I hear about Abraham, I'm just thinking about someone who's radically obedient. Pastor.
Yes, I was just about to say obedient, because, like you said, he left his comfort zone, and like Fernando was saying, being obedient to that call, he left his comfort zone um, and became kind of like a nomad, just depending on God's instruction on where to go next, and he kept following. And for the birth of Isaac, he had to wait a long time, and that really, that's what I believe. That's where I believe he got that title as the father of faith, because despite the wait, he still had enough faith to keep holding on to the promises of God. And something that stands out for me from the story of Abraham is that, in Genesis 22, when they're going, when him and Isaac are going up to offer the sacrifice, he makes this statement. He said, when he's telling the servants, he tells them, "We will go and worship, and we will come back." That's how much faith he had. He was while being obedient to God, he still had enough faith that you know he would come back with his son Isaac, and that to me is something significant. He because faith is simply seeing the unseen and believing that it's there. Even though we cannot see it. So yeah, that's what Abraham. That's something that stands out for me in the life of Abraham.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I just wanna welcome my brother Nathan, who just joined us right now. Nathan, my brother, how are you? Can people hear Nathan? Nathan, we can't hear you. You have to unmute. Nathan, you can unmute now. We still can't hear him. I think he's having difficulty with his sound. Okay, Nathan, we'll get back to you. Let's work on the sound. Let's work on the sound. Uh, I'm carrying on from what Pastor was saying. For for me, what sticks most is the aspect of his his obedience. For me, was radical when I look at it, and what comes into mind is how he sacrificed. Like, such obedience um is an amount of sacrifice that's very, 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 very important, because most of the time, sometimes we might be obedient in logic. Sometimes when, let's say, for our parents, when our parents tell us something, sometimes we obey because of logic, like, okay, fine, this makes sense, okay, okay, I'll do it. But then with Abraham, it wasn't like that. It was just, he would listen, and then he will move. He will just trust that God, whatever he said, even if it seems illogical. And most of the time, like I said, most of the times we are logical. We're like, okay, we're trying to measure if what I've been told, does it really make sense, and then I move on. But what I learned from Abraham is, sometimes the greater the cost, the greater the sacrifice. In the sense that, when you were sacrificing his son Isaac, right? There was a greater cost there, and already that was a greater sacrifice for me. So for me, his obedience itself, for me, it's just something that is very, very interesting, because when you look at it in our lives as well as men, um, most of the time we're logical beings, like human beings. We need to think, we need to do so many things, but when God says, it's very interesting on how we also um we also just swiftly obey, when God is giving us something that is very, very important to us. Pastor. um
And as you were talking, this thought came to my mind that, as we need to our loyalty to God must come first. Um, and that loyalty, like that, the loyalty that Abraham had towards God, led to his family leaving their homeland, and they just followed him. He was the head of the family, and he was, he recognized God as the authority over his life, and he remained faithful to God's call, to God's word, to God's promises. And that to us should be a lesson as men, that people can come and tell us, do this, do that, go this way, go that way, but we as men should always seek God as the authority of our lives and seek His direction, His will, um, and His leading. So, yeah, that's something that came to my mind as you were sharing, Isaac.
Amen to that. Fernando, now, now what's interesting? I want you to share, like, now what's interesting about the story of Abraham is everything wasn't as just perfect now, right? And because we want to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses that Abraham had, and how we can learn also from that, because most of the time, when someone is like, when the Bible gives us flaws so that we can understand that at some point we fall short, because these people are, of course, they are heroes to us when we read them, but then at the same time, they're also human. So let's share about the strengths and the weakness that you saw in Abraham, and how God even still kept on using him.
Okay. Well, I think we've already talked about the strengths. With the weaknesses, um, I feel I feel like there was a point in Abraham's life, I guess, where how Pastor said, our faith in God should come first. Um, and I totally agree with that. I believe that that is very crucial. But in his faith, like once I grow in my faith, I'm supposed to make that, I like to say, make that faith contagious to others. And I guess, we saw in his story, you can see various problems within the family, um, with his son, with his wife. And I guess one of the weaknesses as him being a man of faith is kind of like isolating that faith only for himself, like it's just a me and God relationship, and not sharing that faith with the family. I feel like if he would have done that, a lot of problems that came up could have been, solved or not even happened.
Well, I like the way you mentioned that example of um of sharing the faith as a family, because the Bible tasks us men as priests in the home, and it's very important the way you mentioned it, that um if he had shared the faith that he had, because most of the problems came about when the wife was trying to fix things that God had said already that he was going to fix, but then because the the faith wasn't contagious enough, it kind of weakens you as well. So not only, if, like, I know Fernando and me are not married, Pastor is, but also in the sense that even in our friends, and even our friends, and wherever we are, we also have to have that faith spread around, because that's how you develop people around you, and that's also how your faith is intact as well. Pastor, do you have anything to add on the weaknesses of Abraham?
Yes, I think one of the weakness that Abraham, that we see in his story, is that when he lost sight of God, like, and turned to those around him, he tried to fulfill God's promise on his own doing. And sometimes we tend to do that. We tend to, we get impatient and we try to run ahead of God, and try to do things that, are not according to what God has planned. So it's a reminder to us that, we may be like Abraham and not be perfect. At times, we may lose patience and try to do things on our own. That's where self kicks in. And when self kicks in, it takes the place of our focus on God. God doesn't become the center anymore. So yeah, that's one of the weaknesses that I noticed in Abraham.
Interesting. Also, like, for me, when I look at it, also, like like most of the time we're discouraged whenever maybe you're in the same situation, and then when you look at Abraham, the fact that he wasn't always like his faith was there, right? But then when he fell, it's also showing us that if you're going to not focus on God all the time, there's a time where it could go either way as well. It's not like you're just saved and then that's it. Like it's something that is continuously growing and growing and growing and growing. So from me, from Abraham, I looked at it and I'm like, okay, um, at times, sometimes you feel like you're not perfect enough, and then you realize that even the great men in the Bible even fell also. So it kind of like it doesn't encourage you, but it kind of shows you that as humans we have limitations, as men we have limitations, and you obviously want to what continuously go back to God because he still went back and then everything ended up going out well. So I don't know if there's anything that we wanted to talk about Abraham that you think is important before we move on to the next character. Anything else? All right, so we can move on to Joshua. um Fernando was so I like the way he said it. Like Fernando, it seems as if Joshua, you know Joshua very well. It seems like you know Joshua very well. I like the way you said it, and I like the way you gave us the short brief about Joshua. um what comes to mind when I hear Joshua? I'm gonna start the characteristics I hear about Joshua. I see whenever I'm thinking about a commander, right? Because Joshua was a commander in the army of the Israelites. And I'm thinking about a strong man, I'm thinking about someone who's fit, someone maybe if we are likening him to this generation, probably he's a gym going person, he's fit. I'm just thinking about someone who's fit and so forth, right? But you know what the funny thing is now is when the Bible speaks, when it starts, right? It speaks of someone who's meek and scared, like he was being given a responsibility soon after. A great man, yes, Moses was a great man. Soon after he gets that, he's a bit scared, and then God tells him that be courageous, be strong. And I'm thinking, but he's strong already, In my head, I'm thinking because the Bible starts saying in the passage, like in Judges, it says that he was an army commander. He had these all of these things, and then still the Bible says that be strong, be courageous. So for me now, I'm thinking, okay, so this strong man who's not courageous, like I was battling, every single time I'm always battling about it. But whenever I think about it, I'm thinking about a strong person. I'm thinking about a strong person who's also human. For me, that's what I think about when I hear the story of Joshua, and I think about someone who's humble as well, because most of the time, when you're the army commander, you're the general, everything, but then he has this humility again. So for me, what comes to mind is someone who's strong, but at the same time, he's kind of realistic, he's kind of realistic and so forth. Fernando, what do you think about Joshua? Whenever the name Joshua comes into characteristics.
Okay. I like the way you explained it because it brought something to mind. You have to realize that Joshua was, like the next leader, after what was his name? Ah, I
After
forgot.
Moses, what was it?
Moses, yeah, my bad. I was thinking of Abraham. But when you think, in society, let's just put it in society today. When we think of a leader of a country, we usually think, look at the presidents that have been, in the United States. Most of them are elderly people, because we have this image that the older that you are, the wiser that you are. You're wise, you know what to do, you know how to solve problems. And then there's Joshua, like the young leader, the one that's youthful and ready. But at the same time, I feel like the people of Israel were like, should we trust him? Like, can he meet the expectations? Will he be a great leader? So with Joshua, I believe that he had to have a really, really strong faith because, like I said, you know, there's problems within a group of people, but there's also people that can be problems. There's always that person that's going to criticize, or that person who's going to say, "Oh, well, no, you're not a good leader," or "No, Joshua, you can't be leader yet because you didn't do as much things as he did, or you haven't accomplished as much as he did." So, I think that message, of be strong and trust God is one that us as men should have, or in people as general, because we should be able to, yes, see the reality of what's around us and see, that there's adversity, but also be able to trust God and be like, say, God, I know I might not be the most perfect human being or the best person for this job, but if I have my faith in you, like you say, no weapon formed against me will prosper. So that's what I like about Joshua.
That's very incredible, Pastor.
Yes, I like what you were just sharing, Fernando. That Joshua, if I can share two things about him, is that he was one of those spies who came back with a good report. Him and Caleb, and not only that, while Moses was the leader, we see in the story when Moses would go up the mountain to talk to God, Joshua would be waiting, and so it just shows his commitment, and his willingness. Those two things stand out when I think of Joshua: commitment and willingness. And sometimes as men, we are not always committed to what we do. And that that doesn't that shows that gives kind of like a distrust, and people cannot rely on us, cannot count on us, because we lack that commitment, and we also lack the willingness. So Joshua encourages us um, to do that, and therefore he was fit. God saw him fit to take the place of a great leader as Moses. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very correct. And also what came to mind as well, God's promises, like God was
Mm.
telling him to be courageous, and he was saying that he's gonna be with him also. So for me when I look at it as well, for lesson of men, since we're talking about sins of men, I feel like also um God will follow up whatever he promises, and then he offers a certain way of also achieving certain things, and and when you look at the account of Joshua as well, the way he was winning war, it was just so illogical. How do you walk around 7 times, and then the war falls, like it doesn't make sense. If you look at it, it doesn't really make sense. But at the same time, God even did those promises. It even did so much great things. So as well, when we're trying to bring it closer to our local churches, and I believe we're all leaders at some point, and there are times whereby you look at it and thinking, ah, you know, for real, I don't think this is gonna work, But then now, the best thing about working for God is like God comes through and so forth. I think there was a time whereby I felt like leading anything in church for me was not a thing, because I was thinking, can I do it or whatsoever? And then when I realized that I can't think in that regard, because when God says it's His work, it's His work, So whenever if it seems like it's failing, I'm just like, oh, but then it's your work. And the good thing about God is He definitely does do what He says He should do. Then about the weaknesses now, when I'm looking at the story of Joshua now, for me, I'll start. For me, I think um, there's this thing where you get too accustomed to maybe winning, or everything becomes very smooth at some point, and then later on, you fall off the wagon, and everything. And for me, that still shows me, from the previous story, similarities, like the previous story from Abraham, that it's a constant thing. It's a thing that moves every single time. It's not like if we're done, it's done, and then everything is just smooth. for me, I look at it as an ongoing process and everything. And for us as well, being a man is it's something that's very, very interesting because you are a man every single day. You're a man every single day, and sometimes we forget. We just think, it's done. And so for me, when I look at Joshua, and then after everything that has happened before, and then he goes on, and then he falls off. For me, it just showed me the humanness of the great man. I don't know, Fernando, anything about talking about the weaknesses?
No, I totally agree with you with what you said. That was similar to what I was going to say actually. And there's another thing that I like about Joshua, which I don't think it's necessarily a weakness, but I think people see it as a weakness, and that is the fact that in his faith, he was an excited person. He was an excited person in his faith. Like Pastor mentioned, he was one of the spies that came back, and even though however many said no, we can't do it, he was one of the ones that said no, we can do it, and we're gonna do it because God's gonna help us. You know, I'm a very optimistic person, and sometimes hanging around people and they don't match the same kind of energy that I like to have of being positive. I feel like Joshua was that type of person with his faith, and people around him, people in the people of Israel were probably just like, "What is this man? Like, why is he so crazy? Like, why is he so excited about this? How can he dare say that we can do this or that we're gonna walk 7 times and that this is gonna happen?" So I don't necessarily think that's a weakness, but I'd like to point out that sometimes when we get excited about our faith, or when I guess I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes people don't get our faith when we're excited, and sometimes we have to learn to kind of like slow down our faith and explain it into, put it into simpler terms for people, because otherwise they're like, this man is just crazy. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I like that. I did see that view, but I like that because from wherever there's a statement that we say, like we say that we should not sound over safe, like bring it into context most of the time. Bring it into context. Don't share. When you bring it into context, you share the faith, you share it, you make it very accessible to everyone. People like that. People don't like this thing where it seems as if it's your own faith only. If you find a way of being open enough to just like, what, like, yeah, this can be done, and I like that point very well, because he was just like, we're gonna do this. We went there, and everything is fine, and and stuff, and sometimes it might wrap off in a very weird way, and I like the fact that you pointed that. Pastor, anything on his weakness, Joshua?
Um, I see Joshua having fear in him. No wonder Joshua 1 and 2, God has to remind him that do not fear, do not fear. Like we understand at his time, he's kind of regarded as a young man, and stepping into big shoes, uh, big leadership shoes. And it's natural to have this fear, uh, because you know that everybody has great expectations. And so God Himself had to remind Joshua. God Himself, and I appreciate what God does here, because God doesn't tell the elders or anyone else to come and encourage him. God Himself, the one who told Moses, who led Moses up until Jordan, and then Moses now is resting, and now God Himself encourages. And fear is the opposite of faith, because fear and doubt, and when we have fear and doubt, we don't have faith. But to some extent, fear encourages faith, because if we don't experience that, we won't really experience faith, and so it kind of encourages faith. That fear that Joshua had, once God encouraged him and he overcame that fear, he was after being reminded of how God led, that really set his foundation on solid ground, and made Joshua have this confidence in himself and in the God that he was serving. So yeah, that's one of the weakness that I noticed because again and again, God reminds him, do not fear, be strong and courageous. Do not fear, be strong and courageous. So that's a good reminder to us as well. Sometimes, I mean, it's not wrong to have fear, you know. Sometimes as men, we consider fear as a weakness, but that could be an opportunity for God to remind us that we find our strength in Him. Yes, that's what I
Yeah,
saw.
I was actually going to ask you if fear means the absence of faith, but I like the way you explain it anyways. Like, because I was about to ask you, like, so does that mean that if I'm scared, and then but then you actually described it very well, that um sometimes, um from from someone who speaks, like, I do I do I do public speaking of oftentimes, and when people say that I'm like, what's the trick, basically, right? They say that maybe sometimes I'm scared and everything, and I'm like, sometimes you need to embrace that you are scared, like, it's fine, I'm scared, but the point is, now you don't need to dwell in that fear, like, it's fine, because most of the time as men we say, I'm not, to tell myself that I'm not, uh, I'm not shaken, I'm not moved. That means you're not moved. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes you say, yes, I am scared, I'm scared that I might take this position, I'm scared, I'm scared because I understand the responsibility that needs to be done. However, to dwell in that fear, in that you being scared, that is the wrong part, man. Now, that's the thing. Like with Joshua, he was scared most of the time, because, believe me, I'm imagining coming after Moses, and even Moses at times. Those people, they were murmuring, they were very ungrateful. You could see all of those things, and you're thinking, now they're telling you need to lead those people. You're thinking, yeah, I like to do so, but I know, the logic is he saw all of those things and stuff. So as men, I'm pointing out that it's okay to understand that this task ahead of me is big, and then understanding the responsibility, the burden of it, but not necessarily dwelling in the fact that it's so big, because God is saying that I will do it, and so forth. So for me, I'm seeing that lesson, that yes, it's okay to fear, because it means that you understand, but now to dwell in that fear, now it becomes an issue. So I picked that when you're talking about fear. So I think we spoke much on Joshua, and we're moving into the last two characters, and this gang that I like talking about. Pastor, I'll allow you to start talking about the Hebrew boys,
Yeah, so
the characteristics.
the characteristics of the Hebrew boys. Thank you, I said it just shows how their upbringing influenced them in a very big way because being away from home um, and at a young age they were able to make decisions based on what they were taught um, as young men, and so they they again, like Joshua, had to be reminded of what they were taught when they were young, and that set them um, on a level that was outstanding in the nation of Babylon. So for me, I see young men who are dedicated and committed to God, um, and who remain faithful despite all that was happening around them. That's the main character that I see from this the three Hebrew boys.
All right, Pastor. Fernando, the Hebrew boys.
Yes, Pastor, you took you took the one that I was gonna say. I was going to say committed because like it's crazy. When it's one thing to obey God, let's say when you're at church or when you're at home, where all your surrounding is God. Your parents know about God, your siblings know about God, your brother at church knows about God. But it's another thing to obey God when you're a stranger and where there's other customs and other beliefs. So it brings me back to, Joseph when he was in Egypt, and what happened with Pharaoh's wife. If you're really committed into, your faith with God, your relationship with God, then whatever happens, whatever comes, it's not going to knock you down. God told Joshua, be strong, and those are those same promises that we see with all these characters, um, are promises that God makes to us too. And it should inspire us and motivate us as men to be committed, be committed in our faith. Because sometimes, yeah, like I said, we have faith, but only when we're around people that share that same faith. But we should be committed so that when we go out, when other people see us, and they see that we're different, they ask, oh, well, why is it that you do this? Or why is it that you behave differently? Why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? And then that is also, our faith is also an opportunity to minister to other people.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's very true. This story for me about the Hebrew boys is like I've heard it countless times. Like every single time. I don't know if my parents are trying to remind me, or like every single time that story will always come. Like it was heavy. It was heavy, and you know, you know, those boys were just incredible. They're incredible. If you read from the passage, the fact that there were bright individuals within the Israelites, and they were taken out of that, and they were now in Babylon, and they were still bright. Like the excellency level was just on point. Like these gentlemen were just on point. For me, already already the miracle already there of commitment and resilience is from you being removed from the Israelites, from home, being moved into a foreign land, and still being top. Like for me, there already, I'm thinking, okay, these individuals are incredible. Now, after that incredibleness, they move into now more incredibleness, where now they're tested now, right? And now they're tested, and when they're tested, their boldness that's where I'm excited now. Their boldness, when they say, we will not speak, we will not really speak carefully on this part, because this is what we believe in, and this is not what we're gonna do. And then you're thinking, okay, fine, that's fine, that's fine. They're bold, and then they still say now, even if God doesn't deliver us, and I'm thinking, these guys, are they not taking it too much? You're thinking, even if God doesn't deliver us, because it was easy, to be honest. It's easy when you're an A student and you move on, and you're still an A student, and then now you're still challenged, and you still say yes, and then later on you still say, you know what, even if we had nothing, we're still going to be committed to God. For me now, that's where I'm sold with the story. I'm thinking, oof, this is something that's very, very, very serious. And and when you look at it now, even what God did also now, it's interesting, because the promise that He gave the Hebrew boys, He gave them in still in fire. Sometimes I used to have like challenges where maybe you have an exam on Sabbath, and then all of a sudden on Friday something happens, and then it doesn't happen on Sabbath, right? But God didn't remove the exam. Like He didn't remove. The fire was still there. But He promised them inside the fire. Inside the fire, like inside the calamity, He still delivered them. Now for me, now I'm sold. I'm thinking, okay, you know, for me, when I'm looking at it, I'm branching into the strengths. When I'm looking at it, like sometimes we wish away bad moments to just go away, so that we can be better. But these guys, they didn't wish for bad moments to move away. They say that even in these bad moments, we'll still follow God. And God delivered them. He still allowed them to go through the fire, and then they still got delivered. For me, I'm sold. I'm sold. That story for me, there, I'm covered. For me, that's where I'm very excited when it comes of in terms of strength, in terms of how they their thinking process for me was just something else. Pastor, anything on the strengths?
Yes, you mentioned a very good point there. You know, it's an encouragement to us that we should not um, we should not look for God in trouble times only. You know, we should remain connected to Him every single day, and uh, and that faith and that desire to see God every day will one day be fulfilled, like the three Hebrew boys. You know, they had a strong connection with God, and their desire to see Him eventually resulted in God being in the midst of them, in the midst of the fire. So the whole reason why we need to have faith is because we want to see God, right? And today we cannot see Him with our naked eyes, but we have this faith in us, that this desire that one day soon we will see Him, and especially in a time, the time that we're living in today, you know, this pandemic and everything, and sometimes people ask, is God in this? Where is God? Is God absent from our planet? What's going on? And this is when we really need to use our faith to see beyond and to see God's hand, even though when we cannot see Him. And God will reveal Himself in ways that we have not experienced before. So yeah, that's what I saw from the story of the Hebrew boys.
Fernando.
I really liked what you guys shared, because it brought me back to a song that we have in Spanish, and it's called El Himno de Victoria. So in English, it would translate to the Hymn of Victory. And within this song, there's a quote that says, well, there's a lyric that says, if you pass through the water, you will not drown. If you pass through the fire, you will not burn. And you know, also today I was looking at a video, and it said, God could have easily dried up the whole Red Sea for His people to go through. And sometimes we're like that, we wish, oh, God, I have this problem, to all the people that are watching us. Sometimes you may have a health problem, and you may say, God, well, why can't you just remove the cancer, or why can't you just remove the COVID? Why can't you just remove the problem? But with our faith, God gives us that promise of, it's not going to be easy. There's still going to be problems, but I'm still going to be with you, and I'm still going to deliver you, whether it may be the strangest way possible, but He will deliver. He will come through. So that's what I like about the Hebrew boys, their boldness and their faith. I can't really find the weakness, because they were so bold. They said, even if He doesn't, we're still not going to bow down. So that to me is really amazing. And when I look at their faith, when I first read this story a couple years ago, I was like, God, that's the type of faith that I want to have. The type of faith that even if you don't solve the problem the way I want to, or even if you don't solve it at all, I still want to believe that you're there.
Yeah, yeah, I was actually trying when I was researching if the really weaknesses, and I realized that most of the time the weakness would come from the previous characters. The weakness would come when they try to do things on their own. But then with the Hebrew boys, there wasn't that weakness because they were willing to go to the end. They were willing to say even if he doesn't. Most of the time we don't reach to that point where even if he doesn't, because that's where you start doing your own thing. So for me, when I look at it, that's how you insulate your faith, from whatsoever. Because if you know that even if God doesn't do it, I am still, that's how you can't be moved for me. So when I look at the Hebrew boys, when I see that, and I see the fact that they're not afraid of standing alone, and they were friends. And then also it goes back to us as men, who are your friends, and these things, it's very important when it comes to your faith. Who are your friends? Are your friends willing to stand alone, and all of these things? And you know what I mean? Like, it becomes very, very deep for us. Moving on to the last character as we wrap up the show. The last character for me, Gideon. Gideon, um, if I may confess, I really didn't really like had much knowledge apart when I was preparing a sermon months ago, when I had to sit down and really read about Gideon. And when I read about Gideon, um, I saw a different, I saw a different avenue of faith. Most of the time, when you read the Abrahams and so forth, the faith looks as if it's something that is very, for lack of a better word, magical, in the sense that you have to, like, you're thinking about it, and then it's so mysterious. Like God says, do this, you do it. But when it comes to Gideon now, there's a different avenue now. Gideon is saying, if it's you, okay, can you show me? Like, now I'm thinking, can you do that with faith? Because people think when you start doing that, you don't have faith. The thing where it's supposed to be something that's magical. You just like, I have faith in God. There's no, there's this, there isn't this building of faith. And then when I look at Gideon now, this building of faith. Gideon says, okay, fine. If it's you, show me like this. No, 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 no. Show me again. For me now, I'm thinking, this faith is different. This faith is kind of different, because I'm like, oh, can we do that? Because when I was growing up, most of the time people, like, if you doubt a little bit, that means you don't have faith. But there's this building aspect of faith. Fernando, can you see it? Like, maybe I'm the only one who's saying it. Fernando, can you?
I see what you're talking about, and I love that because I've never thought of it that way until you said it. And um, for me, at least, in the Hispanic community at church, it's also seen that way. Like, oh, if you go through a problem and you start doubting, oh, you're not really, your trust isn't really in God, or you're not as spiritual enough, or maybe you committed a sin or something. But no, I think, we have to realize, sin is in the world, and we're humans in this world, in this sinful world. And I think Gideon wasn't just the only one, that had doubt. I think of, a lot of characters in the Bible that had doubt, but that does not necessarily mean that God wasn't with them, or, that they didn't believe in God. It just means that they had a little struggle in their faith. They wanted to make sure. Sometimes people need assurance. I can't just tell you that I love you. I got to show you too. So I think, Gideon's faith was a faith that just needed assurance, because we're humans and we need assurance.
Yeah, definitely right. Pastor.
Sometimes God invites us to test Him, and we need that faith to really reach out and grab His hand. He wants us to know that He is real, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. So that's what I learned from Gideon's story. Gideon was courageous enough to test God and ask God, show me a sign. Sometimes God wants us to do that, to jump on and say, God, show me that you're real. Show me again and again. And He's willing, and He'll do it, just as He did it for Gideon. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's very, the Gideon story also, it's interesting in the sense that God helps Gideon build the faith, when, because if it's one thing talking to God and saying, God show me, and then God doesn't show you. It's one thing, and it's another thing that God actually delivers you, and then God shows you so many times. Like, God is like, okay, I will show you once, and then He says, can you vice versa the experiment of the fleece and the, and then He does it again. Like, it's like God is reasoning, and then God is in it. That's very interesting in the fact that God also helped Gideon build his faith. So for me, Gideon is also a character that I learned to love. Apart from, and then of course the later on the story about 300, and that was just something that was epic, and so forth. So for me, the Gideon character also kind of helps me when I'm thinking moments where I'm trying to, like, ask God, like, can we build this faith again, because sometimes I'm falling short. So I think as well, like, as men, we're not supposed to be afraid of building our faith, and also seeking for assurance, because God God believes that this relation we have, it's not magical. It's just, it's something that's very practical, and God is there to deliver. So we're unfortunately we are reaching to the very end of the show. Um, but then we have an opportunity to just give a brief takeaways that we've learned today, and as we as we wrap up, basically, I don't know, like in just one line, like Fernando, any takeaways of what we've discussed and what you think people should
Okay.
remember?
Well, it's going to be hard to put it in one line, but overall, I think that what I saw in most of the characters, well, all of them, the ones that we talked about, um, was faith like it continues to grow. It's not a process where you just, you know, you say, oh, God, I have enough faith, and boom, I'm just going to stop there. No, it's a continuous growth. And it's an everyday thing. It's trusting God every day, believing that like we said, believing that He will deliver even when it seems as if He won't. And also, like Gideon, if we have doubt, we can ask God and He will deliver. He will give us that assurance. So overall, I would say, you know, for faith, it's continuous. It's continuous.
Thank you for that. Pastor, any one takeaway as we
Okay.
as we about to end?
Thank you. From the stories of the characters that we looked at tonight, unfaithfulness there's something that I learned this week is that unfaithfulness comes from a lack of memory, and faith is strengthened by memory. God had to remind him. The Joshua had to be reminded of how God led the children of Israel, how God led Moses. The three Hebrew boys had to be reminded, and even Gideon. So I remember this quote from Ellen White. She says that unless we forget how God has led us in the past, we have nothing to fear for the future. So is strengthened by memory. It's always good to look back on the things that God has done, and those things will strengthen our faith moving forward. If He's done it before, there's no doubt He can do it again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for that. I remember somewhere when I was researching that memory is actually something that's very important when it comes to faith. But my takeaway is basically, faith is real. Like it's nothing magical. It's something that is real, and it's something that you can build. It's something real because it's nothing like you're just not. It's something that's real. So for me, from all of these characteristics, I've realized that faith is something real, and I'll just pick a little bit from Fernando. It's very continuous as well. So we have reached the end of today's talk, and I was blessed and I was honored to have two gentlemen to discuss the most amazing men in the Bible. It was very interesting. Thank you so much, everyone, for the viewers who are watching and then the ones who are going to watch later. Um, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, and this is the first episode of Men's Talk, and we're going to be coming back, and we're going to be coming back stronger. And yeah, so join in, follow us on social media, on our socials, jesuslive.io, and be part of the family. And if you have any topics that you want us to talk about, also freely um, DM anyone. If you can see the Instagram handles, just DM, and then we grow in faith as well as men. So as Jesus Life family, most of the time we end with a motto, but then um, I'll allow I'll allow Pastor Paul to give us a closing prayer, and then we'll do the motto.
Okay, thank you. Let's close with a prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to learn more about you and from the lives of great men that you inspired in Scripture, and we praise you and thank you that their lives are an example that you can give faith to simple people. And you don't require a lot of faith. You say in your word that even if we have faith as small as a mustard seed, we can say to a mountain, move, and it will move. So, God, we pray and ask for that faith. And we thank you that you are a God who is interested in developing our faith, and you are the author and the perfecter of our faith. So help us to fix our eyes on you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. So, as Jesus Life family, we have a mantra or a motto that we do before we usually leave. So, you just follow me as I lead. We are prayer warriors,
Prayer
right?
warriors,
Warriors, ambassadors of love,
ambassadors of love,
fearless leaders,
fearless leaders,
and powerful missionaries.
powerful missionaries.
All right, thank you everyone for watching, and it's been a pleasure to have you. This was the first episode of Men Talk, and like I said, more is going to come. And continuously follow Jesus Live. There's so many programs that come up every single day. And be blessed. And bye everyone from the Jesus Live team. Good night.